Welcome everyone to David Dudley Outdoors, and today we're going to talk about the Alabama rig, the story behind the Alabama rig. We're going to cover some details of why it may have gotten banned from professional tournament fishing. Why is it still allowed in some of the AAA leagues where some bass clubs ended up banning it, some fishing clubs didn't ban it. It kind of seemed like a split decision on a lot of people, and the story behind the banning of this lure has always intrigued me. So let's talk about what is Alabama. You may be watching this. I'm going to very quickly brief you on what the Alabama rig is, so you can comment and let me know, should it be allowed in professional bass fishing? Should it be allowed in AAA? Should it be allowed in, say, club tournaments? Is this a fair lure or is this an unfair lure? Does it give people an advantage in bass fishing and catching bass very easily with this lure, the Alabama rig? Or is it a very hard lure to understand, and some people maybe didn't grasp it? So the Alabama rig is basically a wire contraption with multi lures on it. When you throw it, it looks like a school of bait fish coming through the water. Some of them are rigged, as you can see. Some of them have inside blades. It's just anywhere from, and actually what people started doing, to be fair about this also, they started attaching two together, so it almost looked like a fishing chandelier. It looked like a really big school of bait fish. So you had a lot of lures swimming through the water at one time, and people at the time were saying it was at a disadvantage or it wasn't good. But we're going to get into that here in just a moment. So when did the Alabama rig come to fruition, or however you say that? When did it come known to us fishermen? Paul Elias is basically the guy who brought it on the map. And Paul Elias was fishing Lake Guntersville. I think Man's Bait Company was the first one to come up with it. I'm not sure who invented it first, but Man's Bait Company was the one who produced it first. And when it came out, Paul Elias won Lake Guntersville on it, throwing it around a bridge. The shad were spawning. He caught a lot of suspended fish that are typically hard to catch, but he caught them on an Alabama rig. And he won it in a fair amount of weight, okay? So we can fast forward to the evolution of it. So, of course, when a lure comes out brand new, everybody's got to have it. At the time, they were actually, of course, price comes down to anything in the world that comes out that's really hot, whether it's a computer, cars, or whatever. You always see the price way up here, and then the price goes down. Well, at certain times, they were selling for like $150 on eBay just for one Alabama rig. One. And they were hard to get your hands on. Some people were making them out of coat hangers. Everybody was trying to figure out how to make the Alabama rig because it was so desirable, and everybody had to have one. And then anybody who had one at the time seemed to be catching them, better. Or then all of a sudden you start hearing all these tournaments being won on it. So it took off very fast. The Alabama rig just skyrocketed through the media, skyrocketed through the fishing industry, and it was a very, very desirable lure. Now, when it came out and all these people were catching fish on it, the topic was brought up to professional organizations. People started complaining about the Alabama rig. They started saying a couple things that it's making fish too easy for people to catch. It's too good of a lure. it's not fair having 5 hooks on, or 5 to 3. Some states, now guys, if you throw the Alabama rig, look at your state laws. Let your state laws tell you. Some only allow, they don't allow 5 hooks to be thrown at one time. So what they do is they put teasers, they put a little screw lock in, and you may have 3 teasers and only 3 hooks. Some lakes only allow you to have 1 hook. So around this contraption, they'll have teaser, 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 teaser with no hooks, and then 1 single hook that's there. And most of the time, the trailing hook is the one that's going to catch the fish, the one that's further back, not the teasers. You can get bit on the teasers, but they're going to end up coming back. So check your state laws and regulations on fishing, because you don't want to break them. So now this lure, the Alabama rig, had come out and said, hey, this lure is unfair. And guys, I want you to comment. If you comment, give me a logical reason, and I've said this in a lot of my videos. Give me a logical reason. The comment section in the last few videos that I've done has been phenomenal. I've loved reading, and a lot of the comments you guys have put in there have been very fair in your reasoning. If you just hate the Alabama rig, don't just say, I hate the Alabama rig. Just give me something to think about. So all these organizations, Bassmasters and FLW, came out and said, hey, we're going to take a vote into whether or not we're going to ban this lure from professional bass fishermen. So some of the arguments that were brought up in the story behind the Alabama rig is this, that it was allowing fishermen who maybe wasn't as skilled to start doing well in tournaments. It was one of those things where it's giving it an unfair advantage to professionals who aren't at the top of their game. On the other hand, the other people were arguing in the story behind this thing while this was being voted on. The same people who are at the top of their game in professional bass fishing are still going to take the same lure that what they're considering a non-skilled angler. They're still going to be the cream of the crop. They're still going to be at the top of their ball game. It doesn't matter what you give a professional bass fisherman. You could give him the same lure that everybody else has, and he's still going to figure out, he's going to understand it, he's going to figure out how to raise his level to the game with this particular lure. I actually won a FLW tour event on Beaver Lake in Arkansas. I won it mostly on the Alabama rig. Most tournaments aren't dominated by one lure where you catch all 20 bass. If you're a 5-fish limit guy, all 20 bass coming on one lure. Typically, there's a lure that catches the bulk, but you have your filler fish that always come on different lures. That particular tournament, I think I did throw the Alabama rig, and I probably weighed in the bulk of them on the Alabama rig. I don't remember at the time. So my point is this, is that when it came out, up until that point, I had won a lot of money. I think I had already won $3 million in fishing at that point in time. Now I'm up over $4 million. If you don't know who I am, but anyways, so now that lure is out, I took the same lure and advanced it to help me win a tournament. I beat, a very stout field. So there's your two arguments, okay? The best that I know how, okay? There was actually an angler who came out and produced t-shirts, and he said, 1 rod, 1 lure, 1 bass. That was his campaign. Like one of those guys who walk around with a, protest. 1 rod, 1 lure, 1 bass. And an argument that this angler was saying was that it's going to kill all these bass. Well, before you comment that it's damaging the bass, let's talk about this. Yes, it does have 5 hooks anything that is a retrieve lure, okay? Single hook retrieve lure, which is typically a jig head. Anything that is that way, very rarely are they going to get it. When you kill a bass, it's not going to be from a puncture in the side of his belly. It's not going to be a puncture in the side of his meaty gill plate. It's not going to be from a puncture on the body part. It's going to be from a lure that goes down in your throat. You rip his gullet out. He starts to bleed. So when you're retrieving something, very rarely can they get it so far down their gullet that it's going to kill them. So an argument was brought up that he was really against it and said that it was going to kill all these bass, when it doesn't make sense that a retrieve lure is going to kill bass. Probably one of the most damaging lures to a bass is a jerkbait. And why is it damaging? This is a bait that you're going to jerk and pause. When they bite it, it might come from the side, it might come from the back, whatever. But then you're going to have 9 hooks swinging around their eyes, 9 hooks swinging around their face. They don't typically swallow these. And a lot of bass do get blinded by jerkbaits, crankbaits. These are more damaging. So the argument of, it's going to be hooked in the side or what, and I never buy that. So if you're commenting on something like that, I can trump your thought in saying jerkbaits are probably the worst on blinding fish or whatever it is. So, okay, so now here, let me give you the storyline behind what I think when it first came out. People were way against it. They didn't want to do it. I'm going to give you my opinion of the Alabama rig. This is my opinion of what happened. And you guys might bring some light to me. Comment in there, bring some light to me. So, number one comment, not comment. Number one thing I'm going to talk about is the lure itself, and maybe why people were turned off about it. And it had nothing to do with advantage or unfair advantage, because the same fishermen, and another thought, a point people were bringing up, it's giving a better advantage, and this is why this is pretty interesting. Some people thought that it's giving maybe a less skilled person an advantage up to here. Well, some people thought that it's giving a very skilled angler even 10 times more skill. They tried it, they didn't catch it, and they were scared that the better fishermen were going to take a lure, a miracle lure, and just catch 5 times as more fish than them, and then now they have no advantage. So it was all about self-gain. Could they gain something from it, or could they not? It wasn't about fairness. The vote really wasn't about fairness. It wasn't about people being honest with themselves in the opinion. In my opinion, it was, how could this guy gain a better advantage to go over top of the better professional? Or were the professionals that were already good, it's going to make them so much better, and their game is going to be elevated, and these guys who wasn't quite as skilled as the other guys, they were scared they wasn't going to be able to keep up. So let's talk about the Alabama rig in itself. You got a couple things you got to consider. Why is this a complicated lure? Why is this an expensive lure? We're going to discuss that right now. So here we go. Number one, you're going to get hung up a ton. People aren't going to like that. They started throwing it and they got hung up a lot. You got a lot of hooks, a lot of weight that's on this lure. So each rig, let's just throw easy numbers out. You're going to get hung up a lot, and they don't make they didn't make at the time a lure retriever that could get this loose. So a lure retriever is easy. It would go down and get a single lure loose, but it wouldn't go get a multi-lure loose like this. 2, why is this expensive? Think about this. You got at least 5 to 10 jig heads. A swim bait jig head costs anywhere from $1.50 to $2 a piece, okay? You got a pack of baits, so you have to put plastic on your baits, okay? So that's going to cost you anywhere, and this is just ballpark. So let's just say a pack of swim baits, which typically they're $2 a piece, $7 a piece. You had to buy a special lure knocker, which is $25. You had to get a certain rod to throw this chandelier out there. So that was, you're looking at $150. You had to get a special reel, which is $250. Of course, you got to load it up with fluorocarbon. That always costs a lot. Then you had to build your box of baits. And the thing about the Alabama rig that makes it so complicated is figuring out the weight distribution. Back in the day, I got so technical with it that I was building my Alabama rig box actually with hot glue. When I wanted to lighten up my Alabama rig, but I needed a jig head with, my bait keeper on it, I was taking a hot glue gun, pushing it into my mold and building jig heads with hot glue. I actually won Beaver Lake using hot glue jig heads. It's a complicated lure, very complicated. So then you had to build your box. So instead of getting like 10 jig heads, maybe 10 3/8, you had to buy like 75 jig heads of every different size. Then you had to buy the $20 Alabama rig just in itself, rods, lures, and all this kind of stuff. A very small box would cost you $500. Because once you buy the swim baits, jig heads, the wire contraptions, different, some with blades, some with not, all these different versions come out, you're looking at $500. More so around $1,000, but I'm going with the $500 box, keeping it low. So now you're looking at ballpark $1,000 to just start throwing the Alabama rig. And $1,000 is a lot of money. It is. It's a lot of money to start throwing it. So what happened, I feel, is that when they started looking into it, they got hung up, they popped their lure loose, and they're like, dude, you break your lure loose, that's like $40 to $50. $40 to $50. Now, to a lot of people, to me, I don't care who you are. It's a lot of money being. So now we're talking about gas money, truck money, lure money, and now your lure money is just going down the drain. So then people started getting like, I don't want anybody to, because I can't afford to throw the Alabama rig. I feel like it was a lot of the turnoff about it was this is a lure for the rich guys. This is a lure for the people that can afford it, because the argument of it's damaging to bass, I'm not going to buy that. I'm not going. Maybe one puncture in the side. If most of the time they bite the back teaser, does it puncture them in the eye? Maybe a little bit, sometimes. But the wire contraptions keep it so far out, it keeps it away from their eyes, versus a crankbait or a jerkbait that's swinging around their vitals all the time. So with this lure, I'm going to say a lot of the turnoff was money, which is fair in the argument of saying, yes, and it's an expensive lure, but this is an expensive sport. So people felt like they didn't want to be taken, didn't want to be beat in a tournament because they didn't have the money to throw at an Alabama rig. So they're like, let's ban it from our fishing club. Let's ban this from AAA. Let's ban this from professional bass fishing. You had arguments all over the board. I'm not sure if what they say excuse me, of what I'm saying I can prove or disprove. I can only theorize what it is. That's why I'm asking you guys in the comments to comment a little bit on it. Let me know what your thought is, why it should be banned or why it shouldn't be banned. So you have Bassmaster on the professional tour who ended up voting. So we just discussed everything about the Alabama rig. I gave you a little bit of my thoughts of why I think it went the direction it did. I think it had more to do with money. It didn't have to do, and it had more to do with maybe scared, being jealousy of a guy who's already better. Now he's going to be 10 times better when he tried it and he was, all of a sudden he wasn't having the success as everybody else. So to stop maybe some top tier anglers, they're like, no, this is illegal. It shouldn't be right. This lure's catching them way too much. The effectiveness of it is on suspended bass. It is phenomenal on suspended bass. People have figured out ways to catch them up shallow. It's a lure that it has its place in time, but it's not everywhere. You can't catch them on it everywhere you go. It was a lure in its day. That was when it first came out. It was just, wow, was it a hot topic, the Alabama rig. So now where are we at today? I had to dig my box out that had dust on it, and I just to give you guys an example of what this was. But I hope you learned a lot from this story behind the Alabama rig and why it was banned from professional bass fishing. Simply my opinions. You guys may bring up a valid point that I didn't touch on, guys, but I appreciate you guys coming to my channel and watching my channel. We have grown so much in the first year and a half, or not even a year and a half, a year and a couple months. We've grown so well. You guys have been so much fun to me, reading your comments and discussing things with you. If you're new to my channel, go back, surf around on the channel. We have a lot of good discussions on the channel, and of course fishing. Won my 4th angler of the year this past year. You can go back and watch my whole season of how I won angler of the year this year in 2019. But I appreciate you guys. Hit that subscribe button and hit the notification button, and of course you guys are awesome about commenting. So without further ado, I'm